How to make him miss you. Disappear for 3 days in silence. You think he doesn't miss you because he doesn't care. That's what it feels like when the messages slow down, when the attention fades, when you're the one always keeping things alive. But the truth is more uncomfortable than that. He doesn't miss you because you never give him the chance to. You are always there, always replying, always available, always present in a way that leaves no space for absence, no space for curiosity, no space for him to feel the impact of not having you. And when there is no absence, there is no missing. This is where most women get it wrong. They try harder. They send another message. They explain more. They stay visible, thinking that being present will make them unforgettable. But what actually happens is the opposite. The more available you are, the less you are felt. So I want you to consider something that might feel uncomfortable. What if the reason he doesn't miss you has nothing to do with your value and everything to do with your constant presence? That's where the 3-day silence comes in. Not as a game, not as manipulation, but as a reset. A reset of your position, your energy, and the way you allow yourself to be experienced. Because when you remove what was always there, something shifts. Not just in him, in you. And what happens in those 3 days will show you more truth than months of overthinking ever could. Breaking the belief. You have been told that if you disappear, he will chase. That if you go silent, he will suddenly realize your value. But that belief is incomplete, and that is why it keeps failing. Because you can disappear physically and still be emotionally present. You can stop texting and still be thinking about him all day, checking if he viewed your story, wondering if he noticed your absence. And that energy does not change anything. The dynamic stays the same. Silence without detachment is just delayed attention. That is why some women try this and see no result. They disappear, but nothing shifts. He does not come back, or if he does, it is weak, inconsistent, temporary. And they end up blaming themselves, thinking they did something wrong. But the mistake is not in the silence, it is in the intention behind it. If you go silent to make him react, you are still centered around him. You are still giving him power. You are still waiting. And people feel that, even without words. The shift only happens when your silence is not about controlling him. It is about removing access to you when there is no real presence, no consistency, no effort. That is when the pattern breaks. And once you understand this, the 3 days are no longer a trick. They become a mirror that will show you exactly what this connection really is. The invisible mechanism. No one feels the absence of something that is always there. That is the mechanism most people ignore. When your attention is constant, predictable, and easy to access, it stops being experienced as something valuable. It becomes background. You reply fast. You keep conversations alive. You adjust your energy to match his. Without realizing it, you remove every gap where curiosity could grow. And without curiosity, there is no pull. Without pull, there is no missing. This is not about playing hard to get. It is about understanding how emotional presence works. Interest is not built only on connection. It is built on contrast, presence and absence, engagement and space. When there is no contrast, everything feels the same. That is why he can go hours, sometimes days, without reaching out. Not because you are not important, but because your presence never feels at risk. There is no moment where he thinks he might lose access to you. And people only notice what they might lose. The moment your presence becomes uncertain, something changes internally. Attention shifts. Curiosity activates. Not because you forced it, but because the pattern was interrupted. This is the real purpose of silence. It is not to create distance. It is to restore contrast. And once contrast returns, everything that was invisible starts to become felt. The wrong silence. Most women try silence the wrong way, and that is why it fails. They stop texting, but they stay emotionally attached. They disappear from the conversation, but they remain mentally available, checking every notification, every story, every sign that he noticed. That is not silence. That is hidden waiting. You can ignore a message and still be completely controlled by it. You can avoid contact and still revolve around him internally. And when that happens, nothing truly changes. The dynamic stays alive because your energy never left. This is where the illusion breaks. Silence is not about what you do with your phone. It is about what you do with your focus. If your attention is still on him, you are still feeding the connection. You are still reinforcing the same pattern, just in a quieter way. Real silence is different. It is when you stop monitoring, stop anticipating, stop trying to read into everything. It is when your energy comes back to you, fully. And that is uncomfortable at first. Because without distraction, you start to feel everything you were avoiding. The need for validation, the fear of being forgotten, the urge to reach out just to feel something. But that discomfort is necessary, because if you cannot sit in that space, you will always go back to chasing. The 3 days are not about disappearing from him. They are about returning to yourself. And the moment you truly do that, something begins to shift in a way you cannot fake. The 3-day silence challenge. This is where it becomes real. 3 days. No contact, no indirect signals, no checking his activity to measure his reaction, no creating excuses to reach out. Just silence. Not passive silence, intentional silence. You are not doing this to see if he comes back. You are doing this to see what remains when you stop holding everything together. On the first day, your mind will resist. You will feel the urge to send something simple, just to keep the connection warm. A message that seems harmless, but carries the same pattern. That is where you stop. Not because you cannot text, but because you choose not to act from that impulse. On the second day, the intensity changes. The need to check, to monitor, to interpret every small thing starts to lose strength. You begin to notice how much energy was being spent trying to maintain something that was not consistent on its own. On the third day, clarity arrives. You start to see the dynamic without emotional distortion. You see the imbalance, the effort difference, the reality of what is being given and what is not. And during these 3 days, something else happens. Your absence creates a gap, a break in the pattern he was used to. The predictable access disappears. And that is when the shift begins. But what happens next depends on something most people do not control. Day 1. The void. The first day feels heavier than you expect, not because anything dramatic happens, but because nothing happens. No message, no interaction, no reassurance, just space. And that space exposes something you were not paying attention to before. The habit of reaching out, the need to feel seen, the automatic reaction to fill silence before it becomes uncomfortable. You open the chat more than once. You type something and delete it. You think about sending a simple message, just to keep things normal. That is the moment that defines everything. Because what you are feeling is not missing him. It is withdrawal from constant access. You were used to having a channel open, even if it was inconsistent. Now that it is closed, your mind tries to reopen it. If you break here, nothing changes. The pattern resets. You go back to being the one who maintains everything, and he goes back to responding when it suits him. But if you hold the silence, something important happens. You prove to yourself that you can sit in discomfort without acting on it, that you do not need immediate response to feel okay. This is the first shift. It is not visible from the outside, but it changes your position completely. And once you pass this stage, the second day becomes very different. Day 2. The disconnection. The second day does not feel like the first. The urgency is lower, but something deeper starts to surface. You are no longer reacting every minute, but your mind is still trying to pull you back into the same cycle. You start asking questions. Is he noticing? Is he thinking about me? Should I say something before he loses interest completely? These thoughts are not about him. They are about your fear of losing control over the situation, and that is where the shift happens. You begin to see how much of this connection was being held together by your effort. The conversations, the continuity, the energy. You start realizing that when you step back, there is no automatic balance coming from his side. This is not a bad thing. It is clarity. Because for the first time, you are not distracted by constant interaction. You are observing the dynamic as it really is, without the noise, without the emotional rush that hides the truth. Your attention starts to return to you. You notice your time, your thoughts, your habits. You start to feel less pulled toward your phone and more grounded in your own space. And that changes your energy in a way that cannot be faked. Because now, if he reaches out, it will not be met with the same version of you. And if he does not reach out, that silence will reveal something even more important. Day 3, the reveal. The third day is where everything becomes clear, not because something dramatic happens, but because you are no longer seeing through emotion. You are seeing through awareness. By now, the urge to reach out is weaker. You are not checking your phone with the same intensity. Your mind is quieter. And in that quiet, you finally see the truth of the dynamic without distortion. If he reaches out, you notice the difference immediately. The tone, the timing, the effort. Not because you are analyzing him, but because you are no longer desperate for the interaction. You are observing it. If he does not reach out, that silence also speaks. It shows you exactly how much of the connection depended on you. It removes the illusion that something deeper was happening when, in reality, it was being sustained by your presence. This is the moment most people avoid, because clarity forces a decision. You either go back to how things were, accept less, and keep the connection alive through your own effort, or you move differently. You respond based on what is real, not what you hope it could become. And that decision defines everything that happens next. Because what most women do right after this is exactly what destroys the entire shift. The critical mistake. This is where most women undo everything. He finally reaches out. A message appears after your silence. And instead of maintaining the new position you built, you rush back into the old one. You reply fast. You give more energy. You show availability as if nothing changed. And in that moment, the dynamic resets. He does not consciously think about it, but he feels it. The same access is back. The same predictability returns. The same pattern continues. The silence you created loses its meaning because it did not change your behavior when it mattered most. This is the mistake. Treating his return as validation instead of information. A message does not mean change. Effort once does not mean consistency. Attention for a moment does not mean value. If you respond with the same intensity as before, you teach him that he can disappear and come back without consequence. That nothing really changed. That you are still available in the same way. But if you stay grounded, if you respond without urgency, if you observe instead of reacting, then something different happens. He starts to feel that your presence is no longer guaranteed. And that is where respect begins. Because people do not value what they can always return to without effort. What you do in this moment determines whether the silence was just a pause or a real shift. The silence that transforms. At this point, you need to understand something clearly. The silence itself is not what creates change. What creates change is who you become during that silence. If you go back after 3 days and act the same, nothing has shifted. The pattern continues because your identity inside the dynamic is still the same. Available, responsive, adjusting to keep things alive. The real transformation happens when your silence is backed by a new standard. You no longer respond to maintain connection. You respond when there is real presence. You no longer fill gaps with effort. You let them exist and reveal what is missing. You no longer chase clarity. You allow actions to define everything. This is where your energy changes in a way that cannot be ignored. You become less predictable, but more grounded. Less reactive, but more aware. Less available, but more valuable. And this is not something you perform. It is something you hold consistently. Because once you stop giving access without reciprocity, people feel the difference. Not because you are distant, but because you are no longer easy to reach without effort. That is what transforms silence into power. And once you understand this, the next step is not about what to do. It is about how to move from now on. The new posture. From this point forward, everything is about how you position yourself. Not through words, but through consistency. When he messages, you do not rush. You read, you understand, and you respond when it fits your pace. Not to create distance, but because your time is no longer dictated by his attention. When the conversation flows, you engage naturally, but you do not overextend. You do not carry the interaction alone. If the effort drops, you let it drop. You do not fix what is not being maintained from the other side. You start paying attention to patterns, not moments. One good message does not change the dynamic. Consistent presence does. And until that exists, your investment remains measured. This is where your power stabilizes, not in silence, but in how you show up after it. You are not cold. You are clear. You are not distant. You are selective. You are not unavailable. You are no longer easy to access without intention. And that changes how you are treated. Because now, your presence requires effort to be maintained. Your attention is no longer automatic. Your energy is no longer given freely without return. And when you move like this, something becomes obvious. The right attention rises to meet you. The wrong attention fades without resistance. What remains is real. And that leads to the final confrontation you cannot avoid. The final confrontation. Now you face the truth you were avoiding. Not everyone who disappears is confused. Not everyone needs time. Some people only give attention when it is convenient, and they stay as long as you make that convenience easy. So the real question is not how to make him miss you. The real question is why you were staying available for someone who needed your absence to feel your value. If he only notices you when you step back, what does that say about the dynamic you were accepting? If he only shows effort when access is removed, what happens when you give it back freely again? This is where you decide who you are going to be from now on. You can return to the same pattern, accept partial attention, and keep hoping it turns into something more. Or you can hold your position and only engage where there is consistency, presence, and real effort. Because the truth is simple. You do not need to make someone feel your absence if they value your presence. And once you understand that, you stop trying to be missed and start choosing where you are valued. If you want to understand the behavior that makes someone lose interest, even when everything seems right, the next video will show you exactly what most women overlook and how to avoid repeating the same cycle.